Good morning, everybody. This is
Morning.
Martin Gershon. I'm coming to you from the BetterHealth series starting today. It's our first series, January 30th. We have two incredible guests today. Broderick Jones, who's the global head of healthcare and MedTech at Capgemini, who has an incredible background of years of experience, an overview of the entire healthcare industry, and most importantly, how that healthcare industry is working for you and what is it going to mean for you individually. We also have Mike Graffeo, who is an engineer. He is a graduate from Harvard Business School. And most importantly, he runs an incredible company called Fluidform, which is printing human tissue, cardiac tissue, to reshape the way that drug discovery moves forward. As we all know, the cost of healthcare is astronomical. It costs $2.5 billion to bring a drug to market and approximately 12 and a half years. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that everyone understands that there's an incredible pivot point in the world. There's an intersection between science and medicine, technology, and most importantly, the people that are passionate about bringing new drugs, devices, and services to market at this time of incredible change. So, first, I want to thank everybody who has been an incredible participant in this series. I want to thank McGill University for incredible support and a platform. I want to thank Capgemini for all of their assistance. And I want to shout out to everybody here who's participating today. We have over 1,000 people who've signed up for the event. And I want to say that this will be one of many. It is a weekly event. And each week we will be talking about a new aspect of healthcare innovation, technology, and how that impacts you. In the audience, we do have investors, we have people from large companies and small emerging companies, and we have scientists and faculty members from multiple universities like McGill and Harvard and Columbia. We have right now the opportunity to really understand from these two people how the world is changing, the wow factor of what science means to you. So, first, I'm going to start with Mike because Mike really he has a personal story that I think he would like to share with us and tell us a little bit about why he's doing what he's doing and what that impact means for you in the next several years. So, Mike, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself very quickly, and then some of the things that you're doing in your company and the motivation of why you're doing this, because I know you're one of the hardest working guys I've ever met.
Thank you, Martin. That's a very kind introduction. I appreciate it. I'm excited to share with yourself, with the audience, a little bit about what we do at Fluidform. But I really welcome the chance to tell you a little bit about how I ended up doing what I do. I didn't understand it at the time, but when I was 3 years old, the movie The Empire Strikes Back forever changed the way that I would look at the world. I watched the scene at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert, Luke gets his hand cut off by Darth Vader. It's been a while. It shouldn't be much of a spoiler. But when he did that, we fast forward to the ambulance ship, the hospital ship that he's on, and he's having a new hand outfitted. And they show us a flap open and they're testing those electronics in there and his hand is moving. And then he sort of just does this and his hand is just fine. And I can remember this vivid, lasting image throughout my childhood, throughout high school, and going off into study engineering, that in my lifetime, we were going to see the ability to restore the function of body parts. I had the good fortune of starting my professional career at a company called Abiomed. At the time, they were solely working on a total artificial heart, and they were just recently bought by J&J about a month ago. And at Abiomed, I learned just what kind of impact I could make in the space. And it was a really timely, opportunity for me as a young engineer trying to make decisions about what I wanted to work on. I had the opportunity to go work at that time in the fiber optics industry. I was trained as an engineering physics major. I had a lot of optics, laser physics background, but I also had this fascination with the medical field. I ended up, going to work at J&J. And I chose that largely because at the time J&J was working on the very first drug-coated stent. My family's history is the history of heart disease. We've had it all. I've lost way too many family members, including my mother, early to heart disease. And so the ability to make a difference in the field of heart disease has always been a calling for me. I've worked in and around that space and a number of others across the last 25 years. And the ability to actually make a big impact in the field of cardiac disease has been just a huge driver for me. So these last 5 years since we started Fluidform have been, you described hardworking. It's very easy to work this hard when you know the kind of difference that you can make.
The impact that you have on people is yet to be seen. We're really at the pivot point of how all the science and technology and innovation is going to be meaningful to people's lives. Dropping the cost of medication by 50% means instead of $2.5 billion, we're going to see below $1 billion. Instead of 12 and a half years, we're going to see 6 years. And this has a tremendous social impact. And I know that Broderick has an overview of all the things that are important to the pharmaceutical industry. And I know that drug discovery clearly is one of those pivot points and pain points. And I'd ask Broderick to talk a little bit about the importance of drug discovery and the promise of personalized medicine by really reinventing drugs for human beings to solve real life problems.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Mike, and appreciate the opportunity to speak. I think, when you look at the cycle for drug development, as you said, it's tedious. It's a long cycle, an expensive cycle, and the model that we have is very much a broken model, right? And so we need to think about how we address that model holistically, from the beginning of drug discovery, identifying the actual targets and how we actually address those things, all the way through then the clinical process. And each of those points needs to be addressed. And we see a number of things happening across the industry to look at and address those areas. We're going to obviously continue to talk about AI and the importance of artificial intelligence in that space. It has the opportunity, just read recently an article that talked about the idea of, being able to take $200 billion a day outside of that process, using artificial intelligence and AI. And so, that's a way that as we look at analytics, as we use quantum and other areas to really drive very quickly insight into the right kinds of applications, the right kinds of targets, it really can help accelerate what we do. Similarly, on the clinical side, if we look at what can be done here to also accelerate time, there's things that are emerging related to synthetic biology, certainly some of the things that Mike and his team are doing, but even all the way back to the animal stage, right, where we do testing on animals. If we can leverage artificial tissue, synthetic biology, different things that are human in nature versus animal in nature, because obviously the metaphysical form of animals are different from those of humans, we can accelerate, learn things more quickly, and pull through and get to clinical trials in actual human beings more quickly. And then things like decentralizing clinical trials, alternatives to trials, will create then another accelerant to be able to help us develop a more sustainable R&D model. You also mentioned personalized medicine. I think the field of genomics and cell gene therapy and what we do there, I think also offers promises, particularly for rare disease and other areas. But it does create some unique challenges, both from a commercialization perspective as well as from a supply chain perspective. And how do you then address? Yes, it's great. I've spent a good amount of money and time identifying a solution that's personalized and can reach maybe a very small population of people. And that's great if I'm the person that has that disease, but how do I commercialize that, make sure it's going to be valuable to me? How do I deliver those medications in a way that's going to be sustainable? So interesting time for us. The promise of personalized medicine is one that's very exciting, particularly in the area of rare disease, but certainly creates some interesting challenges related to how we both supply those medications and commercialize the business.
That's fantastic. Let's take a look at a video, and I think it will give us some insights into some of the things that we've just been talking about.
Today, the life sciences industry finds itself at a pivotal moment. With the avalanche of digital, data, and cloud technology, companies are on the verge of accelerating everything, from drug discovery and clinical trials to manufacturing and the development of connected health solutions. As a result, the industry has the opportunity to not only accelerate time to market, but crucially, to accelerate time to care, delivering life-changing innovations to patients and providers at a pace and scale never before thought possible. Industry goals that were once unimaginable are now within reach. Companies see the potential to accelerate the time needed to identify an active molecule by 5 to 10 times, to cut the timeline and cost of clinical trials by half, to decrease manufacturing cycle time by 20 to 30%, to reduce time to diagnosis by half, and enable patients access to life-saving medications 4 times as quickly.
Well, I think that really, is an indication of what we're going to be seeing in the future. And what I would like to talk about is some of the technology that's behind some of this that really brings to the forefront some of the important things that we're going to see in the future. So first, let me bring it back to Mike. Let's talk about some of this incredible 3D printing technology. It's really, it's just outstanding in terms of the things that are happening. I mean, one of the things that we are looking at is AI-powered drug discovery, which is really a top priority. Now, what I want to do is I want to understand 3D printing is one part of all of these pieces. And so, for example, here we have 250 companies that Google has invested in healthcare over the past several years. Many of these companies, which we're going to be talking about today, are in the drug discovery space. And I want to understand a little bit more about how this all fits together and where 3D printing fits into this big picture. There are approximately 12 different units within the drug discovery space. And 3D printing, as we see, is in the top left corner, one of the most important aspects. So perhaps, Mike, if you could tell us a little bit about how 3D printing is. Each week, we're going to talk a little bit more about how these other aspects fit into drug discovery, as well as other areas of innovation. But 3D printing has many different possibilities. Drug discovery is one, regenerative medicine is another. And so let's start with you, Mike. Tell us a little bit about the science of this and what I consider the incredible science that's driving the movement here for more 3D printing.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I'm obviously very bullish about what 3D printing can bring to the table, and I'll tell you, I think there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, when I first learned about this field that we broadly call tissue engineering back in 1997, when it was on the cover of Newsweek and there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. We were all going to have organs in the next 5 or 10 years, right? It was kind of like cell and gene therapy a few years earlier. It's coming, it's imminent. It tends to take 25 years when somebody says it's 5 to 10 years out. But what I'm particularly excited about is at that time, we really couldn't conceive of using a 3D printer to reassemble biology. And yet we all know intrinsically that our biology is really complex, right? We don't have anything that resembles an orderly structure, something that would be conventionally manufactured. Our bodies have these complex alignment. The heart alone has alignment in one direction and another that causes the heart to not just squeeze, but to twist. It's kind of like wringing out a towel when you're trying to squeeze that last little bit of water out. That's actually the way that your heart twists in order to contract. And to recreate the complexity of human physiology requires all of that intricacy. It requires, alignment that is very, very hard to recreate any other way. So, several years ago, a lot of different scientists started to look at 3D printing as an area that might be able to help recreate this complex structure. And that's part of why you see in the top left corner, there's a lot of companies that have looked at 3D printing biology as an interesting area. The reason why they all looked at it was it actually, it reads out on AI drug discovery. It reads out on knowledge discovery. It reads out on organoids and organ on a chip. It reads out on protein discovery. Because if we could recreate biology really effectively, we could do all of those things better. As it turns out, my co-founders at Carnegie Mellon learned that there was a lot of challenges with the conventional way of looking at 3D printing biology. And so they developed a new way to do that. That's been under development since 2011. So it's been in process for 12 years. As a company, we've existed for 5. And what it really allows us to do is to actually work with the same materials that you and I are made out of, and to recreate the same complex structure that mimics our physiology quite faithfully. That's a real game changer. This technology was published in the top journals in the world, including Science, and has really demonstrated its ability to be ready to go for prime time. And that's why we're so excited about the future here at the company.
Fantastic. And now, one of the things that's really, I think, important in your company, is the ability to collaborate. And, one of the things that we're looking at is the ability to work with 3D printing, looking at certainly heart is the main focus of your company and companies in the Boston area, but also the sense that we're looking at your North Star. Where are you going as Fluidform? What is the 5-year plan that you see and bringing us forward? What can we expect from things like tissue being generated right now allows us to take a look at early stage drug discovery in a very specific way. It allows us to remove ourselves from the animal model, which is unethical and also incredibly costly. It allows us to have higher predictive value. It allows us, most importantly, to plug in AI to look at the data in a more robust and analytic way. Tell us about your North Star first, and then second, about the collaborations that bring this North Star into focus.
Well, you couldn't have set that up better for me in terms of the way that we think about, going forward the next 5 years, right? We really envision building the premier company to partner with for advanced efforts in complex drugs to be discovered. There is a crying need. You mentioned earlier, everybody has heard stories about, various cancers cured in a mouse. We know these models are insufficient, and we know the reason why they're insufficient. They're insufficient because we have a drug discovery model that starts with, let me start with what I've got and throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And whatever sticks, then I'll start working on and seeing if I can improve it or get it close. And that might work, except that all of the tools we have if you have a guess and check model, you need to be able to check against something that resembles a patient. If you're checking against isolated cells in a dish or biomarkers that you don't know if they really read on the disease, your guess and check process is horribly broken. And it's always been the best we could do. That's why we tolerated the failure rate. If you look at drugs that are identified before going into animals as promising, they have a 0% likelihood of success. It's way, 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 way less than 1%. That's part of why it takes so much time, why it costs so much, because we have a very, very hard time finding the things that are likely to succeed. If we can recreate the human body before we ever go into animals, we're going to have a much better shot of finding things, because we're not relying on biomarkers that may or may not be right. And we're not relying on that sort of guess and check model. We're checking against the same physiologic system that we're ultimately trying to treat. That's a fundamental paradigm shift. And by the way, listen, I'm a fervent advocate of AI. And I think that AI is only as good as the data sets that you're feeding it. And so biology is astronomically complex. Pure in silico drug discovery will always be helpful based on whatever we already knew and could feed the algorithm. But the companies that are really exciting, really doing leading edge work in this space are combining in silico with biology, with an understanding of what's going on in these mechanisms, so that you can drive a smarter AI to be able to make better decisions. And you can actually say, hey, in my AI, I've got a hole in this space. We don't really understand how this works. And I can tell my predictive value here isn't very strong. I'm going to go and do some biology work to build up that piece of my AI. I can train that tool better. And that's where we think, tools like ours are so helpful. We can actually say we need to interrogate this particular area and build up that data set so that we can train an AI to be even smarter.
Fantastic. And one of the things that I want to do is I really want to engage the audience. There's so many questions out there right now. They want to understand, where is this science going? What's the next step? And one of the things that's important in this is collaboration. Collaboration is relatively a new phenomenon. I think that it speaks to the issue of us understanding how important healthcare is. Over the past several years, we all know what the impact of COVID has been for us. It's made us realize that we're all very fragile. It made us realize that healthcare is really the number one important thing. In order to solve any problem, and I built quite a number of companies, I believe, and I think both of you share the belief, that in order to do something effectively and efficiently, you need great collaboration partners. So one of the things that I'm very proud of is the collaboration that Endeavor Life Science and Endeavor Funds has with Capgemini to bring some of these things to the forefront, and most importantly, to talk about the impact that partnerships are having. And so I'd like very much if Broderick can start talking about some of the collaborations that he sees. I think we're looking right now at many different types of 3D printing companies that are all doing incredible things in regenerative medicine, somewhat successful, somewhat not, but they're trying, they're doing their best. And so what I would like really now to focus in on is this incredible collaboration, which I think is setting the stage for something brand new. Sanofi, Capgemini, Generali, and Orange have a new model, and that model is an accelerator based out of Paris with 80 investments already. And we're going to talk about some of those investments. And I'd like Broderick to really lead the conversation on that.
Yeah, sure. So if I build off of what Mike talked about, though, just a little bit to demonstrate your point around collaboration, one of my favorite examples, and Martin, you had it on your slide, right? You had sort of the top left, you had 3D printing, and then all the way down on the bottom right, you had synthetic biology, right? And Mike just talked about the importance of bringing those two things together. So one of the examples that I love to talk about is from France, actually, where we had a cancer patient. She had lost her nose, and they tried to correct that a couple of times. They weren't able to. They then combined. So here you have a hospital network, right, that has a cancer patient, right, that ultimately they've treated the cancer, and so their job, technically is done, right? Now you're talking about collaboration, but they have a patient from a human perspective. I'm happy I survived cancer, but I would still like to have a nose, right? To make it simple. And advancements in synthetic biology around blood, cartilage, et cetera, are emerging and come about. But the actual structure for the nose itself, 3D printing was used to create the actual structure for a nose. It was then, the tissue was then recreated and grown on our own body. And that gets to Mike's complexity around the nature of our own human body, how those things come together. So now you have a hospital network, 3D printing company, a synthetic biology company coming together to then ultimately both treat a patient for cancer and then ultimately bring them back to, normal life, if you will, right? Those kinds of collaboration are what's needed across the industry. And they're not natural collaborations, right? In any of those cases, either one of those organizations could have said, here's the technology. I can 3D print whatever you want. Here's the technology for synthetic biology. You can sort of use that in drug development or testing, but not necessarily here, right? So coming together that way is the kind of collaboration that's needed across the industry. And when we can do that, then that becomes real game changers for individual patients and also our businesses. Broader collaboration that you're highlighting here based on what we're doing with Sanofi and Orange and others, which is ultimately an organization that we formed called Future for Cares, is looking to say, how can we accelerate identification and development of organizations that want to truly drive change in healthcare. And that could be helping them as an organization with their own capability in getting off the ground, as well as then plugging them into the broader community and network to do end-to-end options to help truly advance and accelerate healthcare. But I love what Mike talked about, and that's really right. A company like his, needs to be able to work in the broader ecosystem to actually create the change for patients that we're looking for.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, first of all, I want to thank the audience because there is a slew of questions here, in the comment section. I want to promise everyone that we will get to those questions. We don't have a lot of time today. We're going to pick a couple of questions, but I promise you that within the next week, we will answer all those questions. I would urge you, please contact me. I will put my email up for everyone to reach out to me, and then we will put together a newsletter, and you can subscribe to that newsletter. So let me first just put out here something for everyone. It's just my personal contact information. There will be a team of people looking at the subscribe and newsletter section. And please feel free to reach out to me as well as on LinkedIn. Anybody who wants a copy of these slides as well, please contact me through email through the subscribe@gershoncapital.com button, and we will send you a copy of these slides. So let's just take a look at some of the things that Sanofi is doing. So first and foremost, we're digitalizing everything in the world, and AI is a big component of that. My belief in looking at the research in AI, both as a physician and as an investor, and we do run an investment fund, really looks at the return on investment for the social benefit and for the investor. So let's take a look at what Sanofi is doing and digitalizing its platform. It's coming together with some powerhouses of Orange and Generali, Capgemini, but there's also very specific investments that it's making. Let's take a look at some of these investments. And these are very significant investments which focus in on AI technology and drug discovery. So Sanofi has now a $1.2 billion pact with Atomwise in the AI drug discovery space. And a lot of questions are coming in the comments section about how is AI going to be rolling out over the next several years? What can we expect other companies to use, and what do those technologies look like? So I'm going to ask both of you, really tell us from your perspective how you see AI. I know both of you have an incredible broad perspective of the industry. Mike, maybe you can start us off, and then Broderick, obviously you have a deep expertise in the accelerator itself. There's currently 80 investments, and by the way, this is just the first of several different accelerators, which I think is changing the business model about how we can bring things to the market. So Mike, tell us a little bit of what you see in the world of AI.
Well, Martin, I think it's one of these areas that you can't help but be excited about, right? Even in an economic downturn, we continue to see high value partnerships happening throughout the space. And the reason is really compelling, right? Any tool that can take that 0% likelihood of success or 0.0001 and turn it into something higher than that creates enormous value for patients, enormous value for hospitals and payers, and ultimately for the drug companies. And so, in this case here, whether it's Atomwise or others, what we're seeing is a just crying need. And we hear this every day. When we talk to senior R&D executives at all the major drug companies, they all say the same thing, right? We need better tools to help us create things that are going to translate. And that is the core of the mission. R&D productivity has been under fire. You've probably seen the data that today in big pharma, the marginal R&D dollar has a negative expected return. And that's been the case for about 5 years. That was not the case 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you put more money in, you're going to get more high value out. And today, that's not the case. So why is, large pharma companies today announcing, thousands of layoffs and it's across the board? Because in R&D today, it's only getting harder. We found all the easy things. In addition, there's this other crying need on the partnership side that's being driven by AI through both the work that was done in the EU to drive the ethical use of animals, and the work that was done through the FDA Modernization Act, which was just passed this past September, really driving the move away from these animal models, right? We know that they're not very predictive, and we're using tons of them, and there's a lot of reasons why we need to get away from that. So everybody across the board is highly incentivized. I noticed a question in the chat about how is Big Pharma going to push back on this? Is it a threat? What we see is the exact opposite. Big Pharma is incredibly excited about anything that could increase the likelihood of their efforts turning into drugs that can help patients.
That's a perfect segue. Yeah.
No, I would just add, right? So just a couple of points really quickly, because similar, right, reading through some of the questions in the chat, Ken mentions in the chat there, like, how did the corporate accelerators advance healthcare? And I think, Sanofi is being used as an example here, but Novartis and others, Novartis's Biome is another excellent example of how the organizations are looking at health providers or these novel solutions related to AI, and they're using them across the board. So Sanofi, in this example, they're actually using it across almost each portion of the value chain at R&D. So they're using Atomwise in terms of the drug discovery on the upfront portion. They're using others on the clinical trial side, and then they're actually using others and investing in them and bringing them together on the precision medicine side. The Novartis example that I mentioned in their Biome, one of the things that they're doing, back to this point of collaboration, is taking the partners that they invest in and then putting them in a real world setting with hospitals, collecting the data, right, to try to then demonstrate the value of some connected or digital health therapy or something related to AI, and then bringing that back to the organization. So you can say, hey, while this is a great novel idea, we've actually now have data to demonstrate its effectiveness in the marketplace, which can then accelerate and really change how we're working in healthcare. And so, I think that's one of the ways that some of these larger corporations are beginning to accelerate what we're doing in this space. And as Mike said, it's not at all contradictory or threatening to the healthcare organization or the pharmaceutical company, because at the end of the day, they're going to be able to either shorten the drug discovery process or the R&D process, or they're going to be able to bring something beyond just the treatment in the commercial space that will allow both better outcomes, as well as, frankly, some level of differentiation between their product, which gives them better positioning, formulary, which gives them better positioning in the marketplace on the commercial side. So very much, these kinds of investments by the life sciences company are both self-serving to them appropriately, given they are for-profit companies, as well as altruistic related to getting to the outcomes that patients and doctors want to see.
Absolutely fantastic. I want to take this second just to pause and again thank the audience. We have people like Mahesh who's calling in. Mahesh, where are you calling in from? We have Jake, we have Richard, we have a number of different people from all parts of the world. We really want to thank you, and we want to emphasize the fact that if you like what you see here, please make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter. Make sure that you come in every week. We will be hosting some incredible new companies. Next week, for example, we're going to be talking to Techstars with one of their digital health companies and the head of the Techstars Accelerator. Billy, thank you for showing up. Richard, Ken, Marion, I'm greatly appreciative. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that are happening within the accelerator. This started less than a year ago, which is amazing to me. And look at the types of investments that are being made. To me, this speaks about one thing. It speaks to liquidity. It speaks to the idea that there's respect for the entrepreneur and that science, innovation, and big tech is coming together in partnership. So companies like Oaken are really, I think, pushing the envelope. And there's a beautiful quote here, I think, from the CEO, which I think perhaps you can talk a little bit about, Broderick, because you're so close to Sanofi. They're mission driven, as most of these companies are. They're in an accelerator. And one of the things that I would like to do within this conversation is not just make it an informational conversation, but this is a process of solutions. I am a person who believes that In order for us to have success, we need to take Mike's products and put them into the market. We need to take Oaken's products and put them into the market. We need to help and support accelerators like Sanofi and others, because what they're doing is collaborating. They're putting their egos aside. They're changing business models, and they're driving new things to help people. And that's going to be something we're going to be talking about week in and week out. We're going to be talking to small companies and large companies. By the way, we're also going to be talking not just about illness, but we're going to be talking about health and wellness and how big data uses the information to help people improve their performance in health and wellness. But getting back to the accelerator here, Oaken is one of those examples that started off as an emerging company, just a few years ago. And now it's partnering with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. To me, I would like both of you to speak to one important aspect, which is partnership. Partnership, to me, at an early stage in development, really is underrated. Recently, there was an article that myself and my colleague, Jenny Fernandez, we published in Fast Company. It's about leadership. And one of the things about leadership, which is clearly evident in the Sanofi Accelerator, is how to drive great teams to higher levels of achievement. So I would like for both of you to talk about some of the incredible people that you've worked with, some of the things that are team building, some of that are leadership oriented. And if people want a copy of that article, I'd be more than happy to send that to them.
Yeah, I think, Martin, just a couple of things. One, related to this idea of leadership, and I alluded to it a few minutes ago, and this sort of demonstrates it. Part of what Sanofi has done, and again, they're not exclusive, but part of what they've done is said, let's be strategic about thinking about the investments we're going to make. So the first one you showed with Atomwise is focused on drug discovery, right? How do we do some of the upfront things related to this? The Oaken is more focused on de-risking and simplifying and enabling clinical trials, right? So, and then I think you have maybe one more in this presentation here that's a little more focused on precision medicine. So what you see is the team and the leadership saying, hey, how do we augment and accelerate what our internal organization is doing with a set of capabilities and partnerships and collaboration with other organizations, but across the entire R&D value chain, right? So they can accelerate each portion of those components, right? Both the drug discovery as well as the clinical side, which is where this team is focused here. And so when you have a mindset and the leadership to have a set of vision to be able to think about that holistically, the challenge then becomes, how do you create the right team to accelerate and enable working together and working together effectively, right? Because these are very different cultures, right? In terms of, and Mike, I'm sure, like if you and I were to spend some time, big Capgemini versus Fluid, right? And how we would work together, even as we were talking, right? It's a very different culture. And so how do you merge those things? And that's where I think, quite often support is needed from consulting organizations or others to sort of help also drive the integration of these processes, how they work together, but also the change that's needed within the dynamics of the people in the organization. So, Mike, I'll let you go further and share your perspective.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Broderick. The nature of collaboration certainly has made us better. By leaps and bounds. And I believe that it makes every company that engages in the process better. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we've worked with 4 of the largest life science companies in the world on fairly ambitious programs. And, we've learned some really interesting things. Number one, each of them approaches the way that they handle alliances a little bit differently. They have different expectations around involvement and engagement and the kinds of direction scientifically and otherwise that are going on. Which has forced us to build an adaptable process. Right? We intend to do a lot more of that work, which means that we need to be able to be thoughtful and adaptable and react to that. That has caused us to build our own processes internally to, I think, really be at a position where I'm proud to say I think we're one of the best in the world at this for a company of our size, to be able to say, listen, regardless of what process you use, you're going to walk away from our interaction with you saying, that's the kind of partner I like to do business with. And that's our guiding principle. But we didn't do that by accident. That was really driven by the nature of those interactions. I also really like the way that you brought up some of the discussion of leadership. Early on, we knew that, talent and the ability to grow phenomenal talent and leadership here was going to be a limiter for as long as we existed because of the ambition that we have. And so we went to the state of Massachusetts and were able to procure a leadership training grant that has funded 2 years worth of training for our people to help grow some of the leaders inside this organization. There are phenomenal opportunities for partnership when it comes to workforce development. We worked extensively with an organization led by Dean Kamen out of Manchester, New Hampshire, where they're really focused on regenerative medicine, and workforce development is a core part of what they do. So they work with a lot of the the colleges, universities, the high schools, even to get people exposed to this as a career path, and then starting to build out some of those programs. So we look at it across industry, state and federal government, and some of these organizations that straddle the two as real opportunities to do things that if we were trying to do these on our own, we could never do all of these things at once.
Absolutely fantastic. If we look here, it's very clear from the CEO of Future for Care, which is the accelerator out of Paris, that it is a work of collaboration. And that's really something that I want to emphasize. I want to emphasize in a couple of different ways. It's echoed, across the board from the executive vice president and chief digital officer. It's echoed in many different ways. It is even now being rolled out into future accelerators that are our corporate accelerators that are driving new things with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merck. And Merck Germany really is leading the charge in an Israeli new incubator that's focusing in on digital startups. And finally, I want to talk about solutions. So every emerging company has problems. They've got headwinds. Capgemini and Endeavor are combining our forces for a specific reason. We want to reach out to companies like Mike's. We want to believe in companies like Mike's because we know that the future is digital health. Innovation, technology, and science are coming together. And we are hosting workshops for all of the companies that apply. We are putting our efforts in rolling up our sleeves to bring these companies to the Applied Innovation Exchange at Capgemini, working with Capgemini Invent through Broderick's office. And I would say that this is a solution-driven approach to grow, to scale, and to commercialize for the purpose of really helping some of these large accelerators bring in companies that can solve problems. And what I would say is that the collaboration that Endeavor Life Science has with Capgemini and Applied Innovation Exchange, I would like to think is that this is the tip of the spear and that we can invite all companies. Please let us know. Please contact us by email. Please let us know in the chat if you as a company would like to participate in a workshop. And we've got people on board who can give us advice like Mike, who have incredible experience, and others in an ecosystem, which includes many prominent universities, many prominent companies and collaboration partners to solve your problems. Ultimately, we're here on the planet together. We want to solve the healthcare crisis. The way to do that is through collaboration. And I would say, please feel free to contact me for workshops. I will pass this information off to Broderick and the people at Capgemini. Again, I want to thank this incredible audience for so many questions. We will post all of this live. It will go on the McGill websites. It will go on the Capgemini websites. It will also be in the YouTube channel. It will be on Endeavor. And of course, it will be permanently live on LinkedIn so you can see the recording. Feel free to reach out to me at my email at martin@gershoncapital.com. Again, a really big shout out to so many people who have called in. I see Rayan from Montreal, who I know. Martin is in here. Marion has been an incredible person. Ty, thank you so much again for tuning in. I hope to see you next week. I will say, not to confuse people, but we are shifting from Mondays to Tuesdays. So from now on, Better Health will be Tuesdays at 12 to 12:45. Seems like it's more convenient for everybody. I hope that this has been impactful. I hope that you see that the people here are dedicated to bring something incredible to you to make your life better and healthier. I want to thank everyone once again. Broderick, an incredible, incredible conversation. Capgemini, thank you for being a collaboration partner. Mike, what can I say? You've brought incredible real life entrepreneurial insights. I can't thank you enough for being on board. I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Stay tuned for more exciting things next week with Techstars. The following weeks are going to be equally exciting with people like Bill Hazelton, who was the father of the Human Genome Project, people from incredible companies that you've all heard of. And so, just as a little teaser, please let me know how you enjoyed it by putting some comments into the chats, or you can DM or you can email me. Thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Martin.
Martin.
Thank you, Mike.